2/3 of the seats needed to take back the majority. I thank President Trump for signing bipartisan legislation, even with its flaws, that included several separate bills that hitched a ride on the annual funding bill for the government, including COVID relief, a first ever ban on surprise medical bills, and $328 billion in urgent tax relief for families and local businesses. I recognize that today's Cash Act will pass with bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats alike, and I respect the decision of each member of Congress. But for me, I worry that this whopping $463 billion won't do what's needed, stimulate the economy, or get the jobless back to work. At this point in the recovery, the fact is it's hard to stimulate a Main Street that's locked down by local politicians. This won't help local restaurants get their workers permanently back, or hospitality and convention industries rehire their workers for the long term, and won't help get energy workers back on the job. Will this stimulate our local economies? Not a lot. What we know is that much of this extra $1,600 will go to pay down credit card debt, or savings, or even make new purchases online at Walmart, Best Buy, or Amazon. So rather than merely sending checks to credit card companies, this $500 billion could more than double the number of small businesses and mid-sized businesses getting PPP forgivable loans to hire their workers and stay alive through the recovery. It could make sure airline workers have secure jobs for more than just a few months, and do more to replenish frontline healthcare workers. We should be focused on the families that are hurting most, none more than the 8 million Americans who lost their job due to COVID. Our top priority, in addition to defeating the virus, is to get them back to work. So far, Congress has already approved more than $20,800 directly to a family of 4 with one parent out of work. That's on top of their state unemployment benefits. If we want to do even more for the jobless, this same huge amount of money today could give every unemployed worker from COVID and their employer a $50,000 incentive to return to work. With this huge amount of money, you could even give the bottom 90% of workers in America an income tax-free year for 2021, a full year where you go to work each day for yourself rather than for Washington. Can you imagine what a no-tax 21 would do for low and middle-income families, workers, and the local economy? Or we can simply hold this money back, not hastily spend another $500 billion we don't have, while we assess the impact vaccinations are having on consumer confidence and unlocking of the economy. There are a lot of ways to spend money, if that's the goal. But in my view, let's be smart about it. Let's target assistance to those who need it most. The Ways and Means Committee should be the place to explore and analyze these options, not just have a bill that spends over $400 billion hastily dropped on us at the last minute. I know, working together, Republicans and Democrats, we can do better to help people get back to work and truly help this recovery. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With that, I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Congressman Kildee, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the chairman for his leadership on this and for recognizing me. I stand in strong support of this legislation. The American people are struggling. We hear from them every single day, and they need this additional relief now. The recent coronavirus relief bill passed by Congress obviously is long overdue. The House wanted to pass relief last May, but Republicans refused. And then the pandemic has only gotten worse, and the pain has been worse for so many families and small businesses. So while the relief bill does supply short-term relief, it was regrettable to see President Trump delay signing this legislation. That that delay had consequences. It hurt families with greater uncertainty, and in some cases caused people to lapse their benefits. I did support the legislation that included the $600 stimulus checks because that was all we could get the other side to agree to. But it's obviously not enough, and that's why I support this legislation. $2,000 in direct payments for Americans who are struggling. I, along with my Democratic colleagues, have pushed for these higher payments for some time, and now President Trump agrees. The leader of the Republican Party stands in support of this effort. These $2,000 payments, every member of Congress should support them. This would make a difference in the lives of Americans who are facing the greatest uncertainty that they've experienced for many of them in their lifetime. Putting money in their hands, allowing them to pay their bills, which will help them support those small businesses, but also, probably more importantly, can give them some of the financial support they need in order to make the decisions that they have to make to protect their families. President Trump changed his mind and supports this legislation. That's why we acted. We would have included much larger payments in the legislation had he spoken up sooner. But it's never too late to do the right thing. President Trump stood up. We
Gentleman's
support this
time.
legislation.
1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for an additional 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a moment where we can come together, Democrats and Republicans, and including the President of the United States, and do something big and bold that will help American families get through this most difficult time. So I commend the chairman for his work in moving quickly and putting this legislation together. I commend those on the other side who will stand with us today and support this. And it is my hope that this legislation will quickly go over to the Senate. They will get the message and send this legislation on to the president, wherever he may be, and he'll sign the bill, and we can get this help to the American people. With that, I thank the chairman, and I yield back the remainder of
Gentleman
my
from
time.
Michigan's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm proud to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Schrader.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak against the Cash Act. This is an ineffective and poorly targeted approach to aiding Americans in distress. It is clearly a last-minute political maneuver by the president and extremists on both sides of the political spectrum who have been largely absent during months of very hard negotiations. They have chosen to tweet their opinions instead of coming to the table to get aid in the hands of Americans and small businesses that need it most. Over the last 6 months, and especially in the last few weeks, as holidays loomed and COVID's cases skyrocketed, my Problem Solvers Caucus worked with senators on both sides of the aisle and House and Senate leadership to craft legislation that includes vetted programs like the PPP and unemployment compensation that have been improved upon since the start of the COVID-19 epidemic. I feel for all those who are suffering today due to financial hardship and look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues on a bipartisan, bicameral basis to continue to find ways to help provide relief. People who are making six-figure incomes have not been impacted by COVID-19, do not need checks. We've had 9 months to fix this program to get it to people who need it most. That has not
Gentleman's
happened.
time
Let's
has
reverse
expired.
course and target those in need. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Swazi, for 2 minutes, and he did a great job on the surprise billing legislation that passed in the COVID Act. 2
Gentleman
minutes.
from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership on the Cash Act, and also, as you mentioned, on the Surprise Billing Act. It's really amazing the relief we're going to be giving to consumers this year on a bipartisan basis. With your leadership, we're going to be making people's lives a lot better. So thank you so much for the work you've done on both the Cash Act and on the work to address surprise billing. Madam Speaker, the effects of this pandemic have been cruelly uneven. Some remain unscathed, working remotely and still healthy, while millions of others are awash in misery, unable to return to work or pay their bills, even funeral bills for lost loved ones. While the stock market has hit a new record today, there are still bodies stored in refrigerator trucks. While online retail and grocery stores are booming, airline, Broadway, and mom and pop store employees have been laid off, and life savings invested in small businesses have been wiped out. The president's cynical ploy to threaten the COVID relief package to obscure his dark of night pardons has now resulted in a fighter's chance that we can pass this $2,000 stimulus check legislation if we can only get Mitch McConnell to finally show some empathy. Let's pass this bill, and then let's immediately work to send the billions necessary to save our state and local governments before they fire police officers, teachers, and frontline workers, which will only result in more unemployment checks from us and financial ruin for those families and the communities they serve. Let's rebuild our infrastructure and put Americans back to work, and let's build back better. We can do this if we remember why we are here. And we, both Democrats and Republicans, recognize that outside of this Beltway fantasy land, millions of Americans are desperately pleading for our help. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman from New York yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman.
Well,
The
as I look
gentleman
around,
is recognized for 2 minutes.
thank you. Well, as I look around the room here, it looks like I'm in the U.S. Congress. I mean, I see the American flag there. George Washington's over there. It says, "In God we trust." But looking at this bill today, it makes me feel like we're in the parliament of Afghanistan, Burundi, Yemen, or Bolivia. Do we really think the way to improve the quality of life for Americans is to just print more money from the Fed? If you look around, we're going to be printing another $400 billion. Does anybody look lately at what's going on with the monetary supply? M1 up 50%, M2 up 20%. Don't people realize that when just people print more money, it's not a way to make our citizens wealthier? It's just a way to debase the currency? The way for a wealthy country is to work hard through frugality and through improving one's skills, not by having the Fed print money. Last time that we sent out $1,200 checks, I stopped by my local Walmart, and the people in charge of the electronics section said they'd never seen such sales in their life. Is that really going to improve a lot of Americans to go over and buy some more electronic junk from China? Apparently so. And let's not forget, when we look at inflation, we have inflation right now. Twice in the recent past, we've changed the definition on what inflation is. So we do have inflation. It's just that we keep changing the definition to mask it. That's why the market is up. The market is up because we really do have inflation. We're in the U.S. Congress. We should not think the way to prosperity is just printing money. We should act like we're the United States. It's why that for my whole life, other countries like to invest in the dollar. They respect the value of the dollar more than the national currencies of Burundi, Afghanistan, Yemen, and Bolivia. Those are 4 per countries. That's why I picked them out. So I encourage Senator McDonald to hold a line here, to act responsibly. Thank you.
Has expired. Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas reserves, and the gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Might I remind the gentleman that this is not about creating a path to prosperity. This is a better path about creating a path to liquidity, which subsequently creates a path to demand for people at the lower end of the economic spectrum, 20 million of whom are not working at the moment through no fault of their own. And with that, let me yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, an excellent member of the Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Beyer, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to support the Cash Act, which will send $2,000 checks to the American people. I want to thank Chairman Neal for coming together very quickly to create this act in a thoughtful way. The American people are hurting this holiday season, and they need our help. Our bill would increase those payments to $2,000, which would also include adult dependents, students, and realizing that $600 is not enough for people facing eviction and hunger. For many, this would just pay a past due rental bill from July. It's good and important that we're sending support to small businesses, strong unemployment aid, nutrition and rental assistance, but this relief is coming 7 months later than it should have. And it's vital that Congress not penny pinch the American people now. This cash bill is bipartisan, and if Senator Mitch McConnell would put it on the Senate floor, it would be bicameral. Let me push back to that this is too much. If 40 million Americans work full-time, make less than $18,000 last year. The minimum wage, $7.25, there isn't a single two-bedroom apartment you can rent in a county in America for that money. Tens of millions without health care. My family sells new cars and used cars. And I've watched the debt burden of so many people just rise and rise and rise over the years. Is there a better way? You know, my Republican friends hate it when so-called big government decides what we need. The best way to let people manage their family is to put the money in their hands. Give them that American freedom. Somehow we can print money to do a $4 trillion tax cut over 20 years, but we can't print enough money to help the American people. This is a good bill. I salute my chairman, Richie Neal, and I hope every Democrat and every Republican will vote for it. And I yield back.
Gentleman from Virginia yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserved. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 1 minute. Gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let's get this straight. The small shopkeeper who's lost their entire savings because of the lockdowns will get the same $2,000 grant as the government bureaucrat who's been enjoying a steady paycheck at home for the past 10 months. This money is wholly inadequate for those who've been harmed by the lockdowns and wholly unnecessary for those who have not. And this free money doesn't come from heaven. It comes from the future earnings of those who will be struggling to get back on their feet, making the post-lockdown recovery more difficult and prolonged. And much of the burden of this debt will fall on the young, who've already borne the brunt of these lockdowns. It is, in a real sense, a massive wealth transfer from the future to the present, from the young to the old, and from those who have been hurt by the lockdowns to those who have not. There is only one way to end the suffering caused by these lockdowns, and that is to end them. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Texas, Congresswoman Jackson Lee.
The gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman and the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee for his distinguished leadership. I thank our speaker for her persistent leadership and all of the Democratic members and Republican members who understand what this legislation is. It is a survival cash payment for Americans making under a certain amount, which means they're on the survival pathway. Maybe they haven't spoken to the constituents of, I believe, probably 90% of the members of this Congress who have said they are on the edge and they're about to go over. They can't pay their rent. They can't buy food. They're in food distribution lines. Before I came here Sunday, I was in a place at a church in Greenhouse International where we were giving out food. I asked during the spring for $3,000. I was willing to go for $600 so that desperate Americans could get enough to survive. I am supporting this. I ask my friends and colleagues on both sides of the aisles, recognize that when you are privileged to stand in a place like this, where the constitutional fathers gave us the opportunity
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
to lead this government, stand for the American people. I support the Cash Act because it is survival for Americans.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I yield myself 30 seconds.
The gentleman's recognized.
I would point out to my colleague that nothing in this bill helps anyone get back to work. Not a dime to the 8 million people who are left unemployed because of COVID. Not a dime to help our small and medium-sized businesses. Not a dime for Main Street. With that, I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Congressman Green.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the chair for yielding the time. Mr. Speaker, at some point on the infinite continuum that we call time, we will all have to account for our time. We're all going to have to answer the question, where were you when a pandemic was gripping the land? What did you do when you had the opportunity to put money in the pockets of people who needed it? Where was your courage when you had the chance to cast a vote to make a difference in the lives of people. I say to you, my dear friends, this is the time for us to take a stand for the American people. Let's vote yes to put money in their pockets because we caused them to stay home as a result of the pandemic. The government is for this reason. This is why the government exists, to take care of people. I yield back the balance of my time.
And yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So let me remind members of this chamber why we're here today. The CARES Act passed this House with, I think, 5 dissenters in the entire chamber. That was months and months ago. People exhausted the $1,200 that we allocated based upon our tax system and even the difficulty that we had in trying to find adequate identification for those in America as joint filers making under $24,000 a year. Single filers making under $12,000 a year? Who can live on $12,000 a year? That's $1,000 a month. People have exhausted that benefit. They have tried earnestly and seriously to overcome these obstacles that were created for them, not because of anything they did. We are not here because of malfeasance, speculation that derailed Wall Street in 2008, or corruption. We're here because of an international pandemic when members of the American family at the lower end of the economic spectrum are hurting. When we sought advice on putting together the CARES Act, the Speaker and myself in particular, in those very earnest days with Secretary Mnuchin, we sought the advice of the best economists, former Treasury secretaries, members of the Federal Reserve Board, people that do this every single day, and they all said you need to act with speed and determination. Speed! To get that money into the hands of people who will actually spend it, and that's precisely what we did. We got it to people at the lower end of the economic spectrum. But as we proceed now to the new year, these people need another infusion of cash. And I'm going to go back to this point that I think is something that we need to remember. 3 years ago, this House, over the objection of myself and many others, passed a tax cut that clearly benefited the people at the very top of the economic spectrum, the top 1% in particular. Dividends, buybacks, a top cut in the corporate rate from 36 to 21%, the top rate in the individual side from 39 to 37%. And we can't find it in our hearts in this holiday season, again, based upon the Charles Dickens parable of A Christmas Carol, to provide $2,000 worth of assistance to our brothers and sisters at the bottom end of economic income. This chamber is better than that. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from
So I
Texas.
will reserve as well.
Gentleman from Texas reserves.
I was hoping that the ranking member might have more to say.
I'm prepared to close when you are.
Well,
Mr.
we're not
Chair.
quite prepared to close, but we were hoping that you might intermittently.
I'll tell you what, let me, with your permission, I'll yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for such time as he may consume.
Madam Speaker, you can say a lot about this Congress, but you cannot say we have not worked together and appropriated remarkable funding to help families defeat this COVID to get back on their feet to save small businesses. And a good example is that so far, Congress, both parties, have already approved more than $20,800 direct cash payments to a family of four with one parent out of work. That's on top of an estimated $18,000 of state unemployment benefits, a little less than $40,000 to help working families survive this COVID pandemic. But today, we do nothing in this bill to help the 8 million Americans who lost their job due to COVID. We could double the amount of money that goes to small businesses or mid-sized businesses so they can rehire their workers and keep them on the payroll to try to survive and ride this out. We don't know yet what the vaccinations will do to consumer confidence or to the lockdowns. Our view, and again, we expect a number of Republicans to support this bill. In my view, we would be wiser to assess the impact of the vaccinations and the recovery going forward so that we can target relief to Main Street, to helping get people back to work, and to truly stimulating our local economy. That's where we address the harm that's been done by COVID. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm glad the ranking member reminded us of what we were able to accomplish together in the CARES Act, and I think that's what we're asking for here again this evening. With that, let me recognize the gentlelady from California, the Speaker of the House, Speaker Pelosi.
The distinguished Speaker of the House is now recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I thank him for his masterful work in not only bringing this legislation to the floor, but working in a bipartisan way to have so many important initiatives in the COVID and the omnibus bill that the president happily for us signed last evening. I thank him for his initiatives that are job creating, that stimulate the economy and help meet the needs of the American people. I'm interested in the comments made by Mr. Brady because he said we could be putting more money into small business, and we do indeed in the COVID package, around $300 billion. And I think it's important to note, Madam Speaker, that that brings it to about almost $1 trillion since March 27th, 28th, when the president signed the CARES Act, about $950 billion for small business, nearly $1 trillion. Very important. Small business is the heart of our economy. What could be more optimistic for anyone to do but to follow their dreams, start a small business, create jobs, create wealth, create capital? So important. We see the importance of that to the tune of about $1 trillion, just under $1 trillion in these past several months. But if you want to talk about job creation, I hope the gentleman will join us when we go forward to do state and local, our healthcare workers, honoring our heroes. They're at risk of losing their jobs. While they risk their lives to save lives, they may lose their jobs, and over 1 million of them have. We're talking about healthcare workers. We're talking about police and fire, our first responders. We're talking about transportation, sanitation, food workers. We're talking about our teachers, the custodians of our children for a large part of their day. They are at risk of losing their jobs because of the failure of the Republican side of the aisle to support funds for state and local government to honor our heroes. We want to honor them. When we cheer them, we applaud them. Let's give them pay. Let's let them have job security. Let's give them PPE, the equipment that they need to do their jobs. So if we want to talk about saving jobs or growing jobs for the purpose the distinguished gentleman from Texas mentioned, how we're going to focus on the distribution and the administration of the vaccine. Where do you think that happens? But in city and county and state hospitals in large measure, by healthcare workers in those places, wherever it is distributed. on a individual basis, but they are the heart of the matter. And that is why we need to go forward with another bill that invests in our state and local governments, not to talk about government, but to talk about services, healthcare services, education, transportation, making our lives possible, making our very existence possible by what they do. And without them, how do we function? So again, let's create jobs, let's save jobs, let's grow jobs by administering this vaccine as fairly, as equitably as possible, and free to everyone in our country, because if we're not protected, none of us is, unless all of us are protected, none of us is protected. So this $2,000, which thank you for bringing to the floor on Christmas Eve, was roundly rejected by a Republican that could ask for unanimous consent. This could already be exist as a law if that had happened, but it didn't. So now today we have another chance. Some of the Republicans said, oh, if they really wanted that, they would have called for a vote that day. That wasn't true. It's important to note that was a pro forma session, and you had to have the consent of the Republicans to bring the bill to the floor. They withheld their consent. So here we are today in a legislative day where we just act with the majority to bring the legislation to the floor. I hope it will enjoy a strong bipartisan support. The President of the United States has put this forth as something that he wants to see in terms of, and part of his signing the legislation yesterday. I hope that that view will be shared by the Republicans in the Senate, because we will pass this bill today, either under suspension or under a rule where it just requires a majority vote. Under suspension, as you know, 2/3 vote requires a large number of Republican votes, which I hope we will have, because I do think that the American people would love to see that unity on their behalf. We are a consumer economy. Putting money into the hands of the American people is a boost to our economy. Not much. This isn't a big stimulus package. The COVID bill is a emergency supplemental, but this piece will make it something very important to sustaining our economy. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the work that your committee did. Brandon, thank him, and the others for putting in the dependent clause that people heard. If otherwise, you had 16 years and under would get the direct payment. But I mean, as a mother of 5 and grandmother of 9, I know that children are dependent after 16 years of old, especially if they're still in school. And there are others who are dependent because of, for one thing and another, some physical challenges that they may have in life. Who knows what goes on in a family? But nonetheless, if they are dependent, they will be receiving the direct payment. Another important boost for America's working families, another important boost for our economy as we go forward. So let me again thank the chairman for his work. It's a simple vote. We put more money. Our goals have been crush the virus, honor our heroes who help us crush the virus, and put money in the pockets of the American people. Today, we would be doing that right now. Legislation will be a lifeline for millions of Americans. It improves on the previously passed relief bill by including dependents, ensuring that families with children in colleges, adults living with disabilities, or elderly family members can also receive relief. Republicans have a choice. Vote for this legislation or vote to deny the American people the bigger paychecks they need. To reject this would be in denial of the economic challenges that people are facing, and it would deny them, again, the relief they need. And with that, I urge a strong bipartisan vote for the aptly named Cash Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from California, the Speaker of the House, yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves, and the gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, may I just inquire how much time is remaining?
Gentleman from Texas has 9 minutes remaining. Gentleman from Massachusetts has 3.5 minutes remaining.
So, Madam Speaker, we are prepared to close. And with that, I would yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman from Texas is yielding himself such time as he may consume. The
First-
gentleman is recognized.
First, let me congratulate the Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Neal, for working so closely together on our bipartisan priorities. Ending surprise medical bills when you go to the ER or you have a scheduled medical procedure, ensuring starting at the end of next year for the first time, when you go to that doctor's procedure, you have a true and honest bill in advance of that will be so crucial for so many patients. And I also thank the chairman for working so closely in a bipartisan way on the COVID tax relief provisions and the first reforms of our temporary tax provisions in 5 years. So Chairman Neal, I applaud your work and enjoy working with you. The previous speaker talked about essential workers, our firefighters, our healthcare workers, others manufacturers who've done such an amazing job. We had an opportunity earlier this year to help them. President Trump, in this executive order, proposed a payroll tax holiday for nearly 5 months for these workers. That would have meant for those essential workers, that firefighter, that hospital worker, that nurse, that they would have kept, a family of 4 would have kept an extra $5,000 in their paycheck throughout the holidays. If we really wanted to help essential workers, our Democrat friends would not have blocked that payroll tax holiday and would have adopted our bill to make sure that those taxes, payroll taxes, were forgiven. As for state and local governments, they too, even though I disagree with many of the decisions, deserve our thanks. And thankfully, because this was the most rapid labor market recovery following a crisis in history, and we recovered more than half the jobs we've lost. State and local revenues this year are almost even, down a mere less than 1%. Thank goodness Congress came together in the CARES Act to provide more than $150 billion to those state and local governments to be able to address these needs and continue to function. I will tell you too that, again, I speak only for myself. The best way to help struggling families is to get them back to work. The best way to save our Main Street is to give our small, medium-sized businesses more help than we have. This bill does neither. I think it is correct when the earlier speaker said this is not a stimulus. It is not. And it does nothing to help get people back to work. I worry that as we spend another nearly $500 billion so hastily, that we're not targeting this help to the very the Americans who are struggling the most and need that help. I will also point out that, as I said earlier, Congress has come together to provide a family of 4 with one unemployed parent now just a little short of $40,000 of federal money in their traditional state unemployment because we knew they were struggling. Now is the time to get them back to work. That is my personal objection to this bill. I urge Congress to pause for a moment, to assess the vaccinations over the next few months or year, to determine where next we need to weigh in, if at all, on this recovery as we continue to work together to defeat this virus. With that, Madam Speaker, I am honored to be here today, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas yields the balance of his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm prepared to close, and I want to acknowledge the good efforts of Ranking Member Brady on the energy front
Thank you.
in the tax package as well. A series of compromised measures. He did a terrific job, I think it's fair to say, on surprise billing, and not to mention USMCA. Those were very substantive accomplishments that the Ways and Means Committee led on in the 116th Congress. He mentioned that, as he was closing, he mentioned that this measure he did not want to see treated as stimulus, and he's right. This is not about stimulus, this is about stability. This is about building a bridge for those people who are really hurting as we turn the page on this year. This is about those who are wondering how they're going to make the next rental payment, sustenance for the American family, how they might repair that automobile that sits in the garage idle because they couldn't afford it. That's what this is really about this evening. I started with Charles Dickens and A Christmas Carol and the lessons of Jacob Marley. But let me conclude with a very simple description in the epic America. When asked what it was that set America apart from the rest of the world, it was suggested it was a habit of the heart, a kindness and a decency and a goodness. And let me close the debate on that basis and urge passage of the Cash Act and $2,000 for the American people. I yield back my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts yields back his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 9051? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, purposes of the gentleman from Texas rise.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the conference, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3 of House Resolution 965, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed.
Great job, Danielle.
Corrected that to 20. She'll correct it in the record. Yeah. I said. Well, this is Mr. Thorne.
Thank you.
I mean, if I do need this script, we're in trouble.
That 5 legislative.
Pursuant to Section 4 of House Resolution 1271, the unfinished business is the further consideration of the veto message of the President on the bill H.R. 6395. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6395, a bill to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2021 for military activities of the Department of Defense and for military construction to prescribe military personnel strengths for such fiscal year and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House on reconsideration pass the bill? The objections of the President to the contrary notwithstanding, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Smith, is recognized for 1 hour.
Madam Speaker, for the purposes of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Thornberry, the ranking member of the committee, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, so ordered.
And Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on the veto message of the President of the United States to the bill H.R. 6395.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, I reserve my time and will yield to Mr. Thornberry for his opening statement.
Gentleman from the great state of Washington reserves his time, and the gentleman from the great state of Texas is now recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. Madam Speaker, I thank the chairman for yielding and once again want to commend him for his stewardship of the committee through very challenging times. Madam Speaker, I continue to support this bill as more than 80% of the House did just 20 days ago. It's the exact same bill, not a comma has changed. It still prevents the military from having their pay cut. It still creates new tools to deal with a newly aggressive China. It still includes the important U.S.-Israel Assistance Act and provides help for Vietnam veterans. One thing, I guess, is new in the past few days because a devastating cyber attack by Russia has been exposed. But fortunately, this bill has dozens of provisions to help strengthen the country's defenses in cyber. So the president has exercised his constitutional prerogative. Now, Madam Speaker, it's up to us. Our troops, the country, indeed the world, is watching to see what we will do. Whether we can tune out other differences and still come together to support the men and women of the military and American national security. I would only ask that as members vote, they put the best interests of the country first. There is no other consideration that should matter. This vote is about supporting our troops and defending America. While not perfect, this bill does a good job of advancing both and should be supported once again. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas yields back the balance of his time. Gentlemen, suspend. House will be in order. Members should take their conversations off the floor. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized for such time as he may consume.
Thank you. I rise to strongly urge members to uphold what we did in this chamber just a couple of weeks ago and what the Senate did as well. And that is we passed an overwhelmingly bipartisan bill with roughly 80% of the vote in both the Senate and the House. The legislative branch made it absolutely clear that we support this piece of legislation. And as the gentleman from Texas just noted, we support it with very good reason. It is enormously important to give our troops the support that they need to carry out the job that we all are asking them to do. That is, I think, one of our minimum obligations as members of Congress. And this bill reflects that. This bill is the process of a lengthy effort involving members of both chambers, both parties, that have come together and put together an incredibly strong piece of legislation. That's why it passed so overwhelmingly just a couple weeks ago, and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. The bill is exactly the same and every little bit as important. Now, the president has the right to veto it, but I think we as members of the legislative body have to look at the reason behind that. Was it because of something in the bill? Look, pieces of legislation come through here all the time, and we occasionally miss something, and the president finds out, and you go back, oh gosh, I didn't know that. That's not what happened here. I really want members to understand the president vetoed this because of something that isn't in the bill and was never going to be in the bill. Something totally unrelated to national security and something that we were not going to do in any event. There is literally no reason to veto this bill for the reasons that the president did, and certainly no reason for us not to uphold what we did in passing this bill. This is really important that we exercise our legislative prerogative. There are all kinds of crucial provisions in this bill, but I'll just point to one, and that's the one that Mr. Thornberry mentioned earlier, to give you an idea of why it is important that the legislative branch do its job in exercising oversight of the Department of Defense and providing national security policy. And that's the cyber issue. Thanks to the leadership of Chairman Langevin, chairman of the subcommittee that deals with this issue, Ranking Member Stefanik, they have worked together to really put together an incredible package to try to better address these very cyber issues that we are now facing. That is what we do in this legislation. And, it's not always exciting, but it's incredibly important to meet our obligation to our troops and to the national security of this country. It is enormously important that we pass this bill. We did it once. Let's just do it one more time, and then we can all go home for the year. We can be done, and we can be proud of what we have accomplished. I urge members to vote in favor of this bill, to do what we did just a couple of weeks ago, show the country that the legislative branch can still do its job. I guess I'll just close on one note, which we make a lot of times, but this is the most bipartisan committee in Congress. That's not an easy thing to achieve. We have a lot of things that we passionately disagree about in this body, and we should. But on the Armed Services Bill, we managed to come together. It's not always easy, but we get it done. I think it is enormously important that we let the country know that that process hasn't died. We put together a product, a bipartisan, bicameral product that has gotten an overwhelming number of votes. Let's show the American public that the legislative process works at least a little bit better than sometimes they think it does, that we can get our job done, and in this case, get our job done for the men and women who put their lives on the line to protect this country. We owe them nothing less than that. I urge a yes vote. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time. Sorry.
The gentleman from Washington yields back his time. Gentleman from Texas yielded back his time. All time being yielded back. Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is, will the House on reconsideration pass the bill? The objections of the president to the contrary notwithstanding, under the Constitution, the vote must be by yeas and nays. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Neal, to suspend the rules to pass H.R. 9051, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 9051, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to increase recovery rebate amounts to $2,000 for individuals and for other purposes.
This question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record a vote by electronic device. so I won't. For what purposes does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Member Rick Larson pursuant to H Resolution 965, I inform the House that Congressman Rick Larson will vote yes on H.R. 9051. Thank you.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from New Mexico rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Phillips pursuant to House
And now they're
Resolution
lined up.
965, I inform the House that Mr. Phillips will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Malinowski pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Malinowski will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Gentleman from Connecticut rise.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Rosa DeLauro pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. DeLauro will vote yes on H.R. 9051. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Himes pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Himes will vote yes on H.R. 9051. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Roybal Allard pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Roybal Allard will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Purposes does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Blumenauer pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Blumenauer will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Liu pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Liu will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Barragan pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Barragan will vote yes on H.R. 951. As the member designated by Mr. Lowenthal pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Lowenthal will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Peters pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Peters will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Moore pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Moore will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Cohen pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Cohen will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Veazey pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Veazey will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And as the member designated by Mr. Rooney pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Rooney will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Illinois.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching this stream here. They are voting on the bill to pass
The gentleman from
$2,000.
Illinois rise.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Schneider of Illinois pursuant to House Res 965, I inform the House that Mr. Schneider will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
So with this going to pass,
Does the gentleman from New York
Hold on.
rise?
Member designated by Mr. Gianforte of Montana pursuant to H.Res. 965. I inform the House that Mr. Gianforte will vote no on H.R. 9051.
He's going.
with 5 minutes left,
Does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
Good evening, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Joe Neguse of Colorado, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Neguse will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And as the member designated by Mr. Jason Crow of Colorado, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Crow will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Titus of Nevada, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Titus will vote yes on H.R. 9051. Also, as the member designated by Mr. Barra of California, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Barra will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Rhode Island rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Pingree of Maine pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Pingree will vote yes on H.R. 9051. Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Del Bene of Washington State pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Del Bene will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Sewell of Alabama pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Sewell will vote yes on HR 9051.
We have 2 minutes to vote. What are you guys thinking? Right now, there is 50 yes, 18 no's with less than 2 minutes to vote. Do you think it will pass?
Does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Bishop of Georgia, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Bishop will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As a member designated by Mr. Carson of Indiana, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Carson will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As a member designated by Mr. Clay of Missouri, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Clay will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As a member designated by Mr. Clyburn of South Carolina, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Clyburn will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As a member designated by Mr. Price of North Carolina, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Price will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And finally, Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Richmond of Louisiana, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Richmond will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Purposes of the gentleman from California rise.
Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Congressmember Napolitano will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Vargas, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Congressmember Vargas will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Torres, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Congressmember Torres will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Gabbard, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Congressmember Gabbard will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Yes. Does the gentlewoman from Delaware rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Tonko of New York pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Tonko will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And as the member designated by Ms. DeGette of Colorado pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. DeGette will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
I'm good on this. What purposes does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Krishnamurthy of Illinois, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Krishnamurthy will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And as the member designated by Ms. Adams of North Carolina, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Adams will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Purposes, does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Good evening, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by the Honorable Mr. James Langevin of Rhode Island, and pursuant to House Resolution 965, I'd like to inform the House that Mr. Langevin will vote yes on H.R. 9051, the Caring for Americans with Supplemental Help Act of 2020. Thank you.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Kansas rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Axney pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Axney will vote aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Cleaver pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Cleaver will vote aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Holland pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Holland will vote aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. DeFazio pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. DeFazio will vote aye on H.R. 9051.
Purposes, does the gentlewoman from Michigan rise?
As the member designated by Dr. Reyes of California pursuant to H.Res. 965, I've informed the House that Mr. Reyes will vote aye on H.R. 9051.
For what purposes does the gentleman from New York rise?
As the member designated by Representative Linda Sanchez from California pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Sanchez will vote yea on the motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 9051.
Does the gentlewoman from Virginia rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Trone pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Trone will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Schreier pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Schreier will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Mitchell pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Mitchell will vote no on H.R. 9051.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Connecticut rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Wilson pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Wilson will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Jayapal pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House Ms. Jayapal votes aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Pocan pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Pocan votes aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Doggett pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Doggett votes aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. McNerney pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. McNerney votes aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Fletcher pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Fletcher votes aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Levin pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Levin votes aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Huffman pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Huffman votes aye on H.R. 9051.
Go to because purposes of the gentleman from North Carolina rise.
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mrs. Lee of California, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Lee will vote yes. She will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Florida rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Lawson pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yes on H.R. 9051. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Castor pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Castor will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
As the member designated by Representative Stanton pursuant to H.R. 965, inform the House Representative Stanton will vote aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Representative Kirkpatrick pursuant to H.R. 965, inform the House that Representative Kirkpatrick will vote aye on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Representative Aguilar pursuant to H.R. 965, inform the House that Representative Aguilar will vote aye on H.R. 9051. As member designated by Representative Gomez pursuant to H.R. 965, inform the House that Representative Gomez will vote aye on H.R. 9051. And as member designated by Representative Lujan to H.R. 965, inform the House that Representative Lujan will vote aye on H.R. 9051.
Purposes does the gentlewoman from California
Those
rise?
are just hanging in there. Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. DeSaulnier pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. DeSaulnier will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Does the gentlewoman from Virginia rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Allred pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Allred will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Foster pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Foster will vote yes on HR 9051. As a member designated by Mr. McEachin pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. McEachin will vote yes on HR 9051. And as a member designated by Ms. Porter pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Porter will vote yes on HR 9051.
Purposes of the gentleman from New Jersey rise.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Albio Series pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Series will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And as the member designated by Mr. Bill Pascrell pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Pascrell will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And as the member designated by Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Watson Coleman will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. John Shimkus pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Shimkus will vote no on H.R. 9051.
What purposes does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Kilmer of Washington, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Kilmer will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Heck of Washington, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Heck will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Lawrence of Michigan, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Lawrence will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Horsford of Nevada, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Horsford will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Oregon rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Lipinski of Illinois pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Lipinski will vote no on H.R. 9051.
Does the gentlewoman from Minnesota rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Peterson pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Peterson of Minnesota will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Mr. Who? Gentleman from Massachusetts rise.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Swalwell pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Swalwell will vote yea on House Resolution 9051.
Are they ready? Purposes of the gentleman from California rise. Oh, Lord. For what purposes does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Chair, as the member designated by Mr. Garamendi pursuant to House Res 965, I inform the House that Mr. Garamendi will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Does the gentleman from Illinois rise? For what purposes does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Grijalva pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Grijalva will vote aye on H.R. 9051.
For what purposes does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Shore pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Shore will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Mr. Doyle of Pennsylvania pursuant to House Resolution 965, I hereby inform the House Mr. Doyle will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And as a member designated by Mr. Case of Hawaii pursuant to House Resolution 965, I hereby inform the House that Mr. Case will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
What purposes does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
As a member designated by Representative Gonzalez pursuant to H.R. 965, inform the House Representative Gonzalez will vote aye on H.R. 9051.
The gentleman from New York rise.
As the member designated by Chairwoman Nita Lowey pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Chairwoman Lowey will vote yea on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Chairman Jerry Nadler pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Chairman Nadler will vote yea on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Chairwoman Johnson will vote yea on HR 9051. As the member designated by Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren, pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Chairwoman Lofgren will vote yea on HR 9051. The member designated by Cardinal Jose Serrano, pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Cardinal Serrano will vote yea on HR 9051.
Does the gentlewoman from Massachusetts rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Cooper pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Mr. Cooper will vote yes on HR 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Brownlee pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Brownlee will vote yes on HR 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Bonamici pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Bonamici will vote yes on HR 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Meng pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Meng will vote yes on HR 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Frankel pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on HR 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Presley pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Presley will vote yes on HR 9051.
Gentlewoman from Ohio rise.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Fudge of Ohio pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Fudge will vote yes on HR 9051.
Purposes, does the gentleman from California rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Costa of California pursuant to H-Res 965, I'd like to inform the House that Mr. Costa will vote yea on HR 9051.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Castro of Texas pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Castro will vote yes on HR 9051. Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Escobar of Texas pursuant to House Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Escobar will vote yes on HR 9051. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Deutsch of Florida pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Deutsch will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Does the gentlewoman from New Hampshire rise?
Good evening, Madam Speaker. As the member
Sound like they can-
designated by Ms. Bustos pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Bustos will vote yea on H.R. 9051.
Does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Davis pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Davis will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Purposes does the gentlewoman from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Chairwoman Nydia Velazquez pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Velazquez will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
California rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Chu of California pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Chu will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Illinois rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Rush pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Rush will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Schakowsky pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Schakowsky will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Ms. Finkenauer pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Finkenauer will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As the member designated by Mr. Davis, Danny Davis, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Danny Davis will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
As a member designated by Mr. Kennedy of Massachusetts pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Kennedy will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As a member designated by Mr. Welsh of Vermont pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Welsh will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
Purposes does the gentleman from Florida rise? For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Mukersel Powell of Florida pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Mukersel Powell will vote yea on H.R. 9051. And Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Hastings of Florida pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Hastings will also vote yea on H.R. 9051. And Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Payne of New Jersey pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will also vote yea on H.R. 9051.
What purposes does the gentleman from California rise?
As the member designated by Representative Cardenas from California, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Representative Cardenas will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania rise?
As the member designated by Representative Houlihan of Pennsylvania pursuant to House Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Houlihan will vote yes on H.R. 9051. And as the member designated by Representative Lee of Nevada pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Lee will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Michigan rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
The gentleman from California rise.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Mr. Gottheimer pursuant to House Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Gottheimer will vote aye on H.R. 9051. As a member designated by Mr. Thompson of California pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Thompson will vote aye on H.R. 9051. As a member designated by Ms. Eshoo of California pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Eshoo will vote aye on H.R. 9051.
Got a good feeling. On this vote, the yeas are 275, the nays are 134, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question whether the House, on reconsideration, will pass the bill H.R. 6395, the objections of the President to the contrary notwithstanding. In accord with the Constitution, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members are to record their votes by electronic device. Purposes, does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Thank you.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Gianforte of Montana pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Gianforte will vote yes on H.R. 9051.
I'll give you this. Does the gentleman from New York rise?
As a member designated by Ms. Sanchez, pursuant to House Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Sanchez will vote yes on H.R. 9051. As a member designated by Ms. Sanchez pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Sanchez will vote yes on passing H.R. 6395 over the objection of the President.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Gianforte pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Gianforte will vote yes on passing H.R. 6395 over the objection of the President.
Does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member designated by Mr. Gottheimer pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Gottheimer will vote aye on passing H.R. 6395 over the objection of the President. As a member designated by Mr. Thompson of California pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Thompson will vote aye on passing H.R. 6395 over the objection of the President. As a member designated by Ms. Eshoo of California pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Eshoo will vote aye on passing H.R. 6395 over the objection of the President.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Castor pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Castor will vote yes on passing H.R. 6395 over the objection of the President. As the member designated by Mr. Lawson pursuant to H.R. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yes on passing H.R. 6395 over the objection of the President.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
As a member designated by Representative Cardenas pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Representative Cardenas will vote yes on passing H.R. 6395 over the objection of the President.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?